Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Stats Canada says grocery prices continue to rise. We have details as to how much and which food items have increased the most. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has come out with their naughty and nice list. Chris Sims, Alberta Director with the CTF, will have the details. And BCN's Micah Quinn will explain how Lethbridge firefighters are protecting themselves from frostbite as they battle blazes during the frigid winter months.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. New figures show that grocery inflation surged again in November as the price of bread, eggs, and dairy products shot up. Stats Canada says prices for food purchased from stores rose 11.4% last month compared with a year ago. That is up from 11% in October. The agency says prices for groceries have now risen at a faster pace than overall inflation for 12 months in a row. Analysts say rising grocery prices are not just being felt in Canada, but around the world. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has released their naughty and nice list. The group says taxpayers were visited by the ghost of Christmas waste this year. That included Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem giving central bankers $45 million in bonuses and raises during the pandemic as inflation took off. Now, to talk about the naughty and nice list in more detail is the Alberta Director of the CTF, Chris Sims, who joins us now from Calgary. Chris, outside of Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, who else made your naughty list?
Well, it's one of our fun things we get to do every year here at the CTF, which is why I'm dressed as a Christmas elf. Topping our naughty list is the ghost of Christmas waste. Now, somebody, we don't know who, somebody spent $6,000 on a hotel room in London. We don't know if it was the Governor General. Don't know if it was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He won't tell us. So Franco Terrazzano and our entire team at the CTF have awarded the Ghost of Christmas Waste the top of the naughty list for blowing $6,000. Also on our naughty list is, of course, the Governor General, who spent almost $1 million on her big fancy trip to the Middle East. That included a lot of money on airplane food. There was beef Wellington and beef Carpaccio and a whole bunch of other stuff that we can't pronounce, but we sure paid for. Tiff Malcolm got it because, of course, he was handing out bonuses at the Bank of Canada, even though they failed in their one job, Hal. They didn't keep interest rates low. So that was a big knock on the naughty list there for them. So those are definitely the highlights of that.
Okay, now let's talk about who made your nice list, someone who saved Canadian taxpayers money in 2022.
Yes, very good news here in Alberta because Premier Danielle Smith, our Alberta Premier, tops our nice list this year. Why? Because, well, she's re-indexing our income taxes. What that means in normal people talk is that our income tax brackets are going to keep up with inflation. That's a big change. That will save us around $300 each. So that's a big grocery shop. That's a lot of savings there. And the really big one that'll save everybody money is they've suspended the fuel tax in Alberta. So a 13-cent per liter of gasoline and diesel fuel tax is now gone. So that means if you're filling up a pickup truck, you're saving $15 if you fill up here in Alberta. That's a roast chicken and a jug of milk. So some very serious savings for Albertans this year. So she's definitely topping our nice list.
Thanks so much, Chris. By the way, great outfit. Merry Christmas to you and all of the crew at CTF. That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Calgary. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should not focus on going after hunters and farmers with Bill C-21, but instead turn his attention toward illegal guns being smuggled in from the United States.
Well, the Prime Minister sent out his public safety minister today. We thought to back down on his hunting rifle ban. Instead, he just gave a rambly endorsement of the same policy and announced that his rural MPs from across the country, including rural Newfoundland, support the ban on hunting rifles. And the Prime Minister has tried to deny that he's banning those rifles, even though First Nations have said so, his experts have said so, his own caucus members have said so. So will he stand in the House today and really look us in the eye and tell us that there are no hunting rifles on his banned list?
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr.
Speaker, we made a commitment a number of years ago to Canadians to ban assault-style weapons from this country. There's no place for guns designed to kill the largest number of people as quickly as possible in this country. And that is why we're moving forward with an amendment that ensures that assault-style weapons are banned, not just in the past, not just in the present, but into the future. We're going to carefully work with hunters and farmers and caucus members and all parliamentarians from rural areas to ensure that we get that list right.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also says Canada may shift away from providing humanitarian aid in developing nations. Instead, he says Canada may begin funding more climate-resilient infrastructure. Trudeau says countries are more interested in projects involving renewable energy and bridges that can withstand weather disasters.
We are all connected, north and south. And if we are not there for investments in infrastructure, for investments in health systems, if we're not there for investments in greening their economies, we're going to face worse and worse economic and political difficulties around the world, but also in our own countries. So I think that 2022 actually, even given the war in Ukraine, or perhaps because of the war in Ukraine, led us to a greater emphasis on the global south than ever before.
The doctor shortage we are experiencing in Canada is only expected to get worse. A recent report shows our country will face a deficit of 44,000 physicians by the year 2028. But according to a pediatric surgeon from the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, internationally trained doctors such as himself are an untapped market that can help minimize the shortage.
And I'm from Toronto, but I trained internationally abroad in Grenada. And I did my adult general surgery residency in New York City before returning back home to Toronto at the Hospital for Sick Children to complete fellowship. And so I think that an untapped resource are Canadians who study abroad. At my own institution, over 1,600 of our graduates are Canadians who have gone abroad for their education, and upwards of 3/4 of them are currently within primary care.
Dr. Josh Ramgist will also share the pathway doctors from other countries must take in order to start practicing right here in Canada. That interview with BCN's Naveen Day is coming up later in our program. Now, speaking of a shortage of physicians, the Milk River Health Centre Emergency Department will be temporarily closed Friday at 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. January 3rd due to a lack of doctors. Officials say nursing staff, however, will remain on site to provide care for long-term care residents. EMS calls will be rerouted to Chinook Regional Hospital here in Lethbridge or the Raymond Health Centre. Well, it was nice to finally enjoy some sunshine today in Lethbridge, but it was cold once again. In fact, the extreme cold warning from Environment Canada continued for our region. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, fortunately, the mercury will be climbing by quite a bit fairly soon.
Yeah, that is the good news story of the week, I think, for us here in southern Alberta anyways, as this bitterly cold Arctic weather will be leaving us for some warmer temperatures for sure. We still have to get through this evening, though. -31 is the overnight low. It's going to feel more like -43 with that wind chill. Into Friday, the temperature warming up significantly, still -13. Going to feel the wind chill a bit as well, so we still want to bundle up for Friday. Also a 60% chance of snow. But after that, we've got some warmer weather on the way. I'll be back later in the show to tell you about the Christmas weekend weather.
Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The frigid cold temperatures have a huge impact on the way our firefighters are able to fight blazes here in our city. Officials from Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services highlighted the ways first responders handle the cold weather and offer tips on how to stay safe during the holiday season. Video journalist Micah Quinn chatted with fire staff in Lethbridge about how they protect themselves from frostbite and hypothermia during the cold, bitter winter months.
We can't work as long in the cold. We have to recycle the members to get them rehabbed and rewarmed.
Firefighters are often the unsung heroes that are always ready to help when a call comes in. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services members have been braving the freezing temperatures during these cold winter days in our city. Officials from the organization talked about the hazards firefighters face as Old Man Winter rages on around them.
Our safety equipment that we wear, our air breathing devices, they they can freeze up. They'll get very foggy. We won't be able to see through our masks because of fog. We don't have defrosters on them, so we have to keep switching them out to put new ones on.
Officials from LFES are also reminding the public about safety precautions to help prevent fires as people enjoy the Christmas holidays with family.
Christmas trees, real trees are nice, but make sure they have enough moisture and they're green trees and they're not dried. And same with the lighting that's around those trees, making sure that there's no shorting in the wiring and making sure that wires are not exposed. Just make sure that everything's safe for the holidays, and I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a safe one.
According to members of the fire department, requests for services are rising during the holiday season in Lethbridge. These include calls for motor vehicle collisions and for people who have been exposed to the cold weather, like our city's homeless population. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Staff from Lethbridge County say the City of Lethbridge will no longer be the primary responder for emergencies in the county. Coaldale and Colehurst will take up the mantle of bringing these zones into their areas with the support from regional departments. Lethbridge County Reeve Tori Campbell says there will be a seamless transition from all parties involved in the beginning of next year.
This seed was planted a few years ago, I guess, already. The town of Coaldale had indicated to us that they would like to expand their department and therefore expand their response zone. So this has been something we've been working on for a long time now. Through the ICF process that we went through several years ago, working with our smaller urbans, I think the focus was always to try and bring a little more continuity to those fire services agreements. Eventually, I think we realized that having 6 different fire contracts was a big challenge for us, I think. So to be able to slim that down a little bit with the Barron's Fire Department going away and now changing our agreement with the city, I think this is something that the county has been working towards for a while now.
Officials from Lethbridge County say service levels will not be impacted by these changes. A donation of around $11,000 is headed to the Lethbridge Food Bank. The Try High Food Drive is an initiative by students from Winston Churchill, Chinook High School, and the Lethbridge Collegiate Institute. The schools joined forces to raise food and cash donations. Chinook High School took top spot in the competition, with students collecting 752 pounds worth of food, along with over $4,600 in monetary donations. Students from Chinook High School, who were flanked by their teacher, talked about the importance of helping out those in need during the busy Christmas season.
It gives a sense of community, especially to Chinook and students here. The fact that everyone came together and brought food, it's a really heartwarming moment.
If I was one of those families in need, I would want people to donate for me and other people as well. So it's really good to promote it, and it just felt really good. Also, again, like she said, the sense of community, we all came together and did the same thing.
Now, if you'd like to donate to the Lethbridge Food Bank, you can do so by visiting their website. Friends and families held a very special vigil honoring the victims of the mass shooting at a condo complex in Vaughan, just north of Toronto. Over 100 people gathered outside of Vaughan City Hall to pay their respects and to offer support for the families. 6 people, including the gunman, died during the tragic event last weekend.
As a community, we are still very much in a state of disbelief about the horrific act of violence that occurred in our city this past Sunday. An act that killed 5 innocent people, 5 innocent victims, and injured an additional one. An act that devastated families and friends who are left at this point with far more questions than answers. An act that no doubt has deeply affected our courageous first responders who, as always, ran toward danger to keep us safe.
I actually live in the building where it happened, so just wanted to come and pay my respects to everybody. I've only been in the building less than 2 years, but it's a very tight-knit community, and you get to see everybody on elevators in the parking lots, and it's just very sad. I was shocked, very shocked.
Members of Montreal's Ukrainian community gathered to remember a 7-year-old girl who fled the Russian invasion of her home country with her family, only to be killed in a hit and run here in Canada. The funeral was held at St. Sophie Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral.
So the Ukrainian community is in shock and disbelief, and it's a period of mourning for sure. We know that the family is strong, and they are feeling the support of not just the Ukrainian community that was here yesterday for the service, but the Quebec community, the whole Montreal community that comes to rally in support of the family, they feel it, and they're very, very appreciative of that fact. Well, it's difficult. They lost their daughter, they know that. They came here to seek refuge, and they recognize it as a horrible accident. The family is planning on staying in Montreal, making their life in Montreal, and it's just a very tough start to that beginning. The mother was alone here with the children. Even with the community that's here, it's important to have family, and her husband was here. He's very strong. He's a super person also. He's able to have, that grounding effect for the mother and the children.
In August of 2020, an explosion in Beirut shook Lebanon to its core. More than 200 people lost their lives, and thousands became homeless in a matter of seconds. Help the Persecuted's field ministry team mobilized right away, setting up a trailer and offering food, water, and other critical supplies. The area also served as a hub for construction crews, which helped to repair homes damaged by the blast. Reporter Peter Wooding caught up with the Christian Charities Regional Director at their Search the Book Cafe to discuss how they're helping out, including planting seeds for Christ along the way.
A mobile cafe ministry that provided vital help for those devastated by the Beirut explosion in 2020 continues to feed people in Lebanon with not only great food and coffee, but also the Word of God. Salam, Regional Director for Christian Charity Help the Persecuted, explains more about how God used their Search the Book Cafe after this disaster and how it continues to impact people today.
This was serving people, supplying them with water, drinking water, coffee, and hot meals. And it was placed in the area that was affected by the explosion. And people were coming, and we were talking to them, sharing with them how we are there, like to help them, and praying with them, listening to their needs. And from there started everything. We started going to their houses, fixing their windows, doors, kitchens that were demolished. After the explosion we helped, and everything was finished and it's over. We moved to the mountain of Lebanon, and we placed this on the corner of the highway here, where people can stop, have a cup of coffee. There's a lot of Christian literature that's offered for free, and if they want to get any book or the Bible, they can ask for it. It's there in the case. They can see it and they'll ask for it. And Christians here can share with them the gospel and the good news.
And Help the Persecuted hopes to open several Search the Book cafes throughout the region so that they can feed many more people, both practically and spiritually. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance in Lebanon.
Well, Christmas is almost here, a time to relax and celebrate with friends and family. Christmas to many of us is much more than just a holiday. Pastor Joel Klemick with the Mid-City Church here in Lethbridge explains why we celebrate this special time of year. He says it's really because Jesus is the reason for the season.
The reason behind Christmas is these two stories that are really very much in conflict with each other. There is the story in culture, the story that gets told of this fat man, very jolly, dressed in red, that flies through the heavens, goes around the world with gifts for all the boys and girls. But there's a catch. They have to be nice. They have to make the nice list. And that's very much in conflict with what the real message of Christmas is. And that's this, that while we were yet naughty, Christ died for us. That there is a man who is also full of joy, but he doesn't fly through the heavens. He actually leaves heaven to come to earth, to live among us, to love us, to show us the way to real life. That is his gift, the gift that truly keeps on giving, that whoever would receive the gift of his life receives life everlasting, that goes on forever. And so every Christmas, when we participate in generosity and extending grace and forgiveness to all the people in our lives, we're actually imitating Jesus and the gift he gave us. So be radically generous this Christmas.
Amen, Pastor Joel. It's looked a lot like Christmas for some time here across much of southwestern Alberta. We've had our fair share of snow, and the extreme cold weather we've been suffering through as well should be ending soon. Full weather details are on deck. You may begin removing a layer of clothing fairly soon if you live here in Lethbridge. The mercury is going up and just in time for Christmas. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, how much warmer are we talking about here?
Well, Hal, by Boxing Day, we're going to be seeing that mercury rise by more than 30 degrees because look at that. On Monday, we're seeing a high of 9, comparing that to what we've been seeing this past week. And to Friday, we're already going to be seeing much more seasonable weather, minus 13 the high. Still going to feel it with that wind chill, though, and also 60% chance of flurries on Friday into Saturday and Sunday. Beautiful, sunny Christmas week, minus 1 for Christmas Eve day, and up to 5 degrees. So now we're in the pluses for Christmas Day. So Merry Christmas. That must be our Christmas gift here in southern Alberta. Up to 9 degrees on Monday, of course, which is Boxing Day. 4 degrees the high on Tuesday, and then 2 on Wednesday. So it's going to be a lovely holiday weekend and into next week as well. Average high for this time of year, minus 1. Average low, minus 13. 14 was our high temperature on this day back in 1994. And in 1983, we had the coldest, which was minus 32. Sun rose this morning at 8:26 a.m. and this afternoon at 4:34 p.m. So already we are sitting at 1 minute longer than we were yesterday as we had our winter solstice yesterday. So there we go. Merry Christmas. Days are getting longer. We're getting more daylight already. Okay, so that Arctic outflow still in effect for the south coast for Victoria. High of 0, looking at freezing rain and ice pellets. 0 degrees in Vancouver. Vancouver expecting still 10 centimeters of snow. They're looking at a snowstorm in effect. Both Edmonton and Calgary still sitting in the minuses, going to warm up quite a bit by this weekend. Same things for the rest of the prairies here. Minus 30, the high tomorrow in Saskatoon, minus 27 in Regina, minus 19 in Winnipeg. Of course, feeling so much colder with the wind chill. And those temperatures in the prairies are expected also to warm up significantly by the weekend. Looking at a winter storm warning for this whole region in central Canada. Toronto sitting at 1 degree tomorrow, 4 degrees the high in Ottawa and Montreal. That whole area expecting ice pellets, freezing rain, 90 kilometer per hour winds. So travel is very, very hazardous over on the Atlantic coast as well. Also expecting a winter storm, looking at wind warnings and rain warnings in effect. 6 degrees the high in Fredericton tomorrow, 8 degrees in Halifax, 4 the high in Charlottetown, and minus 1 in St. John's, Newfoundland. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Stats Canada says the number of job vacancies fell in October to its lowest level since August of 2021. The agency says there were about 871,000 vacancies in October. Vacancies dropped in construction, administrative and support, waste management, and remediation services. StatsCan says no sector recorded a large increase in its number of unfilled positions, although vacancies remain near record levels in healthcare and social assistance. BlackBerry reported a net loss of $4 million US in the quarter ending November 30th. That is down from a $74 million gain in the same quarter last year. The change amounts to a loss of 9 cents per diluted share compared with a 5-cent loss last year. Total revenue for the Waterloo, Ontario-based company dropped from $184 to $169 million. The company has pivoted in recent years from devices to software and is focused on cybersecurity and internet-enabled technology. Elon Musk is not resigning as CEO of Twitter just yet. Musk said he would abide by his Twitter poll asking users if he should remain in the top job or not. Even though 58% of 17 million votes said he should step down, Musk now says he will remain in the job until he finds someone foolish enough to take over. Now here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 221 points in the day to finish at 19,349. The Dow was down 348 points to 33,027. The S&P 500 was down 56 on the day to 3822. And the Nasdaq was down 233 points to 10,476. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 10 cents to 78.19 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 26 cents to 507 US. Gold was even on the day at 1792.52 US an ounce, and silver was also even at $23.57 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.19 per bushel, barley's at $9.71, canola's at $19.25, and corn is at $11.60 per bushel. Live cattle were down 23 cents to $155.90. Feeder cattle January contract was up 15 cents to $183.98, and lean hogs February contract was up 65 cents to $89.05. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.26 US. Recapping one of our top stories, new figures show that grocery inflation surged again in November as the price of bread, eggs, and dairy products shot up. Stats Canada says prices for food purchased from stores rose 11.4% last month compared with a year ago. That is also up from 11% in October. The agency says prices for groceries have now risen at a faster pace than overall inflation for 12 months in a row. A pediatric physician at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto has some ideas to address the doctor shortage in many regions of the country. Dr. Josh Ramgist will share details with us momentarily. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, visit leftseniors.com/volunteer drivers. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
The doctor is out. At least that's the way it appears to be, as many Albertans scramble to find a physician due to a doctor shortage. And according to a recent report by the Royal Bank of Canada, our country will face a deficit of 44,000 doctors by the year 2028. The report also shows that approximately 6 million Canadians are already lacking access to a family doctor, which is a 30% jump since 2019. To talk more about this issue and some possible solutions, I am joined with Dr. Josh Ramgist. He is a pediatric surgeon at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. Dr. Ramgist, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Now, Josh, can you tell us, what have you experienced firsthand with these shortages in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think here in Toronto, we're experiencing what Canadians really across the country are experiencing. It's difficulty with access. It's hard for families, be it adults or children, to be able to see their primary care physician. And as a result, it's even more difficult to access subspecialty services. And that's primarily because it's like the report showed, we don't have enough doctors.
Now, growing up as a child, my peers wanted to become police officers, firefighters, rock stars, and of course, doctors. And so it seems like there should be many Canadians lining up for their chance to pursue their dreams in healthcare. So where's the bottleneck? Is the issue with our post-secondary education, or has interest in the fields just simply diminished?
No, I don't think interest has diminished. I actually think it's higher than ever. The pandemic has really shown the need, and it's shown a big spotlight on that people want to be in healthcare and they want to be on the quote unquote front line taking care of their fellow citizens. I think our bottleneck is really at the post-secondary level. There are plenty of students, plenty of individuals who want to become physicians, but it's so hyper competitive, be it in Alberta or in other provinces, that there's really a bottleneck there of people trying to get into medical school.
Now, here in Alberta, our per capita spending on healthcare is among the highest in Canada. Yet the pressure is put on Albertans to find new physicians as doctors leave the province or retire, and that's felt hard here. What is causing the shortage in Alberta?
Well, I think what it comes down to is a structural imbalance. where there are physicians, but they're not in rural areas or they're not in areas where there's the greatest need. And so there needs to be a little bit more equity. And while there are certain programs that are in place that are designed to try to help get more physicians to those areas of need, they simply aren't effective. And so I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be more recruitment of physicians who want to work in either underserved, rural, or just areas that need family physicians.
Now, I know recently our government has been trying to headhunt physicians, even from Ontario, to bring them to Alberta. But generally, doctor, is our healthcare dollars reaching the physicians, or is it getting eaten up in administrative?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of it's coming to the physicians or even to the healthcare overhead. I think there is, unfortunately, a lot of bureaucracy that exists within healthcare, and that certainly requires a little bit of nimbleness in order to be able to navigate that effectively. But at the end of the day, I think what a lot of Canadians and Albertans want to see is that their healthcare spending goes directly towards patient benefit.
Now, you spoke earlier about how you've personally experienced these shortages, but you also have a solution to the problem. You say that internationally trained doctors, such as yourself, can play a role in addressing the crisis. Tell us more about that and why this is a practical solution.
Sure. Again, this is something that I feel firsthand. I'm from Toronto, but I trained internationally abroad in Grenada. And I did my adult general surgery residency in New York City before returning back home to Toronto at the Hospital for Sick Children to complete fellowship. And so I think that an untapped resource are Canadians who study abroad. At my own institution, over 1,600 of our graduates are Canadians who have gone abroad for their education, and upwards of 3/4 of them are currently within primary care.
Now, for some people, they prefer a holistic approach to their health care. Do you think we need to switch to an Eastern medicine philosophy or maybe a balance of both? And would this help our healthcare situation in Alberta or even across Canada?
I think it's an important adjunct, and I think incorporation of Eastern medicine is going to be necessary. But fundamentally, we are looking for allopathic healthcare, which is the standard globally, and that's what most patients have come to expect and deserve.
And what are the obstacles or objections heard from healthcare systems or governments when the solution is suggested to bring in workers from other countries?
I think what it comes down to is standards of care. And I believe that Albertans and Canadians deserve a high level of care, which they have come used to, which is what they deserve. And so I think it's important that whoever is brought in, wherever they've trained, that they meet what the Canadian standard of care is. And that can be both through testing or through practice experience programs, so that once they are at the bedside and once they're actually taking care of patients, they are delivering the high quality healthcare that Canadians expect to receive.
And I know, like, my family, part of my family comes from India. There's a lot of people in India wanting to pursue a career in healthcare, wanting to become doctors or some type of medical professional. What would you suggest as a career path for someone trained in India that wants to come to Canada?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think the routes to practicing in Canada, it's really about being able to complete residency, which is specialty training in a given area. And so it is competitive to become a resident or to receive ongoing training in Canada. In America, there's plenty of opportunities simply because there are more spots. And so that may be one of those avenues where obtaining residency training in America creates the opportunity to come to Canada afterwards, similar to the pathway that I've taken.
And what are the obstacles or objections heard from healthcare systems or governments when the solution to bring in international workers is suggested?
Well, I think, again, part of the goal is to, like I've said, ensure that there's appropriate standards of care. And then it's also to ensure that the staffing demands meet the population demands. And this is, again, to talk about the structural imbalance. It is not helping anyone if we bring in more physicians and they practice where there are already physicians. We need to see that new physicians are practicing where the need is the greatest.
And it's been said that under Alberta's existing healthcare system, patients are seen as a cost. Now, if Alberta Health Services had a voucher system, could this be better not just for the patient outcomes, but also for the health of Alberta's health system?
Well, I think what's important to remember is that Canadians take a lot of pride in their healthcare system, and we as
Absolutely.
Canadians want to be felt that we are providing the same standard of care to our neighbors as we would want for ourselves. And I think that any system that creates a tiered system or that allows somebody to jump a queue is not going to be well received because fundamentally we believe in equal access for all. And so I think it's important that any new systems still allow the same equity of access.
And are there specific countries that Canada should look to when recruiting more physicians? I know I referred to India, but I was just referring to, like my family comes from there. But what specific countries should Canada be looking at if they're looking for more physicians?
Well, I think the obvious one is America. They're just south of the border, and the standards of care that are expected of an American physician are very similar to that of a Canadian. And there are plenty of Canadians who are currently in America. And so creating opportunities for them to be able to return home, to be able to take care of their fellow citizen, I think those will be met well. And that'll certainly help start to meet that demand which RBC has shown.
Now, we talked about someone wanting to pursue a career in healthcare in Canada, coming to Canada, and we talked about a career path where they go to America first, and then they come to Canada. Now, if a physician is already practicing in another country, and he or she decides that they want to move to Canada and start practicing here, what testing or additional learning must be completed so they can be licensed here and have confidence in our healthcare system and working here?
Right. So every province has their own standard pathway for internationally trained graduates to be able to return. And so it can vary from province to province. And I think that that's one of the early areas of opportunity. The opportunity for a national licensure body would ameliorate it being at a provincial level. That way, there's opportunity for a flow of physicians across Canada. I think that the next step is going to be in terms of subspecialty training, give it in primary care or in surgery, such as myself, where it's important that the standards of training match that of Canada. And it may be required that that individual has to repeat some of those years in order to be able to pass the Royal College examinations or to be eligible for those exams in their given specialty. So I really think, in terms of a streamlined pathway, one, there is the medical license that the individual would have to obtain, and that's through passing Canadian board examinations. And then two, it will be subspecialty certification, which is going to be based on pre-existing training or the need for additional training.
And how long would all that take?
Well, it varies depending on specialty. Right now, after completing medical school to become a family doctor, there's 2 years of additional training. For most, say, general surgery programs, that can be anywhere from 5 to 7 additional years of training after medical school.
And is there anything else that you want to add? Any final thoughts on this subject, Doctor?
Well, I think that what's important to realize is that this is a problem that we are now seeing really at the forefront, and the pandemic has exposed a lot of our deficiencies in healthcare. I think it's important that new strategies are coming out to where Canadians who want to be able to become physicians have the opportunity, be it abroad or those who already are trained and want to return to Canada, have pathways and programs in place to help them return to be able to take care of their fellow Canadian.
Now, I know you referred to the pandemic, but this year, like even post-pandemic, there's still a lot of hospitalizations, especially with children, when it comes to influenza and RSV. Do you feel that flus and sicknesses are becoming more advanced, and this is just going to further up the demand for doctors in Canada?
So I do. I think that what the pandemic has shown is that it's shown our communities are susceptible and there's a heightened sense of awareness. And parents fundamentally want to be able to provide care for their children and ensure that they're well cared for. And so I think that we may have a little bit of immune naivety simply because we were in lockdown for 2 years. And so now, as people start to return back to their daily activities, they are more exposed to one another. that's certainly a possibility. But I think we also have a heightened sense of awareness and of the severity of influenza or RSV. And so parents and kids are being much more proactive in seeking out care that they required.
So you're saying that the lockdown actually made our immune systems more frail in that regard.
True, but I also think it made us more savvy. I think that we're a little bit more in tune with it. And that's important. I mean, fundamentally, if you're sick, you need to be able to seek care. And if you're seeking care, you need a physician.
Absolutely, and I know a lot of people were concerned during the lockdown that, well, am I going to get my vitamin D? But I won't be in the sunlight as much, and so there was a lot of concern about that. People were. I remember, like, at one time I was going shopping and I couldn't find vitamin D in the store, or like I couldn't find certain vitamins because people were just buying them up along with toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Well, health literacy is one of those things that doesn't get taught in school. And unfortunately, it takes these jarring experiences to make us more used to it. And so, again, if we want to try to find silver linings in what was a pretty grave pandemic, the fact that everyone is more health conscious, I think, is good. I think that we're going to see trickle down effects in other areas of preventative care, which is really important.
So what do you feel needs to change in our educational system to promote more health literacy? Would we need to add something in our K-12 curriculum?
Well, I think that being able to have that conversation about what does it mean to be sick and how do we start to care for one another, I think that that's important. I think that, when I think about what did I learn in biology, sometimes it can seem a little bit more abstract than thinking about our own personal health. But being conscious of the world that we live in and the way that diseases are spread is an important part of any biology program. And that can start as young as in the K program as well, where we just talk about germs and why do we need to wash hands and why is that important. So it's simple things that can be integrated early on.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, Dr. Ramjes, but we really appreciate having you on the show today.
Thanks. It was a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Dr. Ramjes is an internationally trained pediatric surgeon at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto.
Books have always been a great attraction for so many of us. I remember as a youngster spending many a glorious afternoon finding a new treasure to read at my local library. Even today, books are still not just an effective way to communicate ideas, but a great escape from a cold winter's night. One local author who's recently released her first book is Christina Romerl. She joins me now to talk about the life of an author in Southern Alberta. Christina, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about your first release. It's called A Christmas Candy Killing. Can you give us the premise of this story?
Yes, Christmas Candy Killing is the first in the Killer Chocolate Mystery Series. It is set in gorgeous northwestern Montana at the foot of the Rocky Mountains in the fictional town of Harriston. Identical twin sisters, Alex and Hannah, own Murder and Mayhem mystery book and chocolate shop, and their line of killer chocolates are named after poisons that have names like strychnine strawberry. The twins and their rescue dog, Miss Watson, get embroiled in solving the murder of their friend, who happens to be a true crime fan. And the friend is murdered soon after mentioning that there's a killer featured on a true crime show that is now living in the village. So when Alex becomes a top suspect of the sheriff, Hannah insists that her twin needs to step in and find the real killer.
Wow. That sounds fascinating. And I love chocolate of all flavors, and I'm pretty sure some have attempted to plot my murder. How did you come up with this story idea?
When I submitted my manuscript to my agent, Dawn Dowdle, she suggested that it needed a stronger hook. Cozy mysteries revolve around a theme, and sometimes it's a library or a bookshop, and she said it needed something a little stronger, and so I just started racking my brains what it could be. And I love chocolate, and I finally settled on the whole idea of the poison themed chocolates, because I think it's fun to kill people with poison in my books. So
Gotcha. That's a little macabre, but that's good to know, just in case we're ever invited over to your house for a Christmas party or something. So this story is set just south of where we both live, at the foothills of the Rockies in Montana. How did you come up with this region as a backdrop for your story?
I really toyed with the idea of setting it here in southern Alberta, but the reality is, I think the US is obviously my main market, and a lot of people in the US like to read about places in the US. And because I love the Kalispell area so much, and we visit there regularly, it's so similar to Waterton. And so I thought I would just move the little community that I'd created just a little bit across the border. And of course, with mountains as the backdrop, you can never go wrong. Plus, I mean, there are more trees and lakes that give me more options in the mystery sense when I'm writing than Bald Prairie does.
Oh, that's for sure. So do you feel that you've maybe built a relationship with the cast of your book?
100%. I really do think of my characters as very real. And in fact, I often will speak to them when I'm writing, asking them, what would you do? And they do talk back to me.
That's really cool. So authors will often say that about the characters in their books, and sometimes those characters, they do something outside of what you were expecting as the writer. I know one writer that I worked with years ago on a few projects. We were working one day, and he was totally stumped because his main character had climbed into a tree in a field, and he couldn't find a way to get her out of the tree. Did you encounter any shenanigans like this from one of your characters?
100%. My main character, my protagonist, Alex, is far more serendipitous and impulsive than I am. And so she is often doing things that puts her at significant risk. And then, of course, I have to find ways to extricate her from these situations.
Well, that sounds great. So I've got to ask you, in A Christmas Candy Killing, did you have a character that you didn't like, but you left them in the story anyway?
Honestly, no. I love my characters. To be honest, the ones that are the nastiest or the quirkiest are the most fun to write, and so I really do enjoy all of them. It's a great place to kill off people if you want to have the bookish satisfaction of having someone taken care of that you might not like in real life, who you might kind of have a slight resemblance to that person in the book. But generally, I really do like my characters. They are, and like I said, the nastier they are, the more fun they are to write.
Gotcha. I can kind of understand that. Absolutely. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but maybe is there a summer camp Death by Chocolate in the works, perhaps?
No, there is no summer camp. Actually, book 2, so I have already written book 2. It's with my editor in the editing phase, and it is set at Christmas as well. So this will be an ongoing series set at Christmas. And so summer is just something we talk about in passing in these books. The fun part, of course, is talking about the chocolate and coming up with recipes for it. I will be, in fact, testing a recipe for book 2 today after the interview. So,
well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Anytime you get to eat chocolate, it's a good moment in the timeline of our lives. So I wanted to ask you, who is the target audience for this book?
generally speaking, cozy mysteries have a demographic of women that are usually a little bit older, usually over 40. And we are seeing a bit more of a trend to younger protagonists and a younger audience. But by and large, my audience is women over 40. And I would even hazard more commonly over 50.
Well, very interesting. Your career and background was in finance and banking, correct?
This is very true. I graduated from the college here in Lethbridge and went pretty much straight into a banking career. I started on kind of the operations side and then went into personal banking and finished off as a commercial banker.
Wow, that's very interesting. So you also have a blog, and is that your gateway into writing, or how did you get started?
I've wanted to write since I was a child, since I was in my teens. And it wasn't really until I took a creative writing course at the college about, I think it's about 15 years ago now. And that really sparked the writing. It was still slow going for a long time, but the pandemic was what gave me the boot that I needed. Because I suddenly had so much time on my hands when the library here in Sterling closed, where I'd been working part time, and um, I said to myself, "This is it. This is your chance to finally write the book you've been toying with in your mind." And I did. I sat down, and a few months later, I had a finished manuscript that I could send out.
Well, that's great. That took a lot of dedication and probably research too. Do you think there's a difference from writing your blog post to tackling an entire book?
Uh, it is very different. Blog posts are fun. They're short. You can write about, a variety of things. A book does take a fair bit of commitment. And there are times when you literally just don't want to slog through it, especially the first draft where you're just getting the ideas on the paper. And it is amazing the excuses you can find to keep yourself from writing. But it is important and crucial to just keep at it, because once you get through that first draft, the magic really happens in the revising.
Wow. I'm sure that's a lot of encouragement to others out there. I do understand that there are many local writers in and around Lethbridge. Is there kind of a Alberta roundtable of authors, if you will?
I actually have written my books kind of in a bubble here by myself, but I am discovering that there are writers groups here in the area. McGrath has a writers group that meets at their library once a week. And I was just recently asked to participate in a panel at Wordbridge, which is a writers conference in Lethbridge. And I know that there are some writers groups out of Calgary, and I suspect there are lots of small groups here in the area as well. It is a far more prolific community than I had originally thought.
So one thing I haven't asked you yet is how you got started with this particular book and storyline, and what was your motivation to cross that finish line?
Um, this book, I had started it a couple of years before the pandemic. And I kind of did a boot camp weekend where I just took a couple days and just wrote and wrote. And at the end of that, I realized that my plot just wasn't quite right. And so I spent literally a couple of years toying with it, thinking about it. And then when the pandemic hit, that was my spark where, I thought I have no more excuses. And I just did it. I mean, it really was a matter of just committing myself to sitting there every day, putting in the time, getting the words on the paper. And like I said, first drafts are terrible, and you can't let that frighten you, because it really is when you go back and you revise over and over, and you're, on your 13th, 14th, 15th draft, that it starts to look like a finished book. And so for me, the motivation was just really just finally getting it done. And I mean, I have to be honest, it's been a fun thing to do. And now that I'm into the habit of it, I find I don't need to coerce myself into the writing as much anymore. I really look forward to those hours spent in front of the computer getting the words on the page.
Well, that's great. And like I've heard Owen Benjamin say, persistence is fertile. So you definitely persisted, and we have your book. And we actually have Penny Warris of Analog Books to thank for this interview, because she introduced me to your book this week and said that you got everything right. So could you talk maybe about the support you've received from others in our community on your quest to publishing this book?
Yes, absolutely. Penny has been wonderful. Penny is one of the owners of Analog Books here in Lethbridge. They opened during the pandemic. I did not even realize they were there until my publisher asked if there were any independent bookstores here in town, and I Googled and found them. And so I approached them about doing my book launch there, and they have been hugely supportive. I have appreciated all that they've done to help. Chapters as well in town, the manager there, Scott, he has been very supportive, and they've given me a huge amount of shelf space. So I'm very grateful for the community in Lethbridge helping to really support and advocate for my book. It's been great.
It's wonderful to have that community support. I wanted to ask you maybe if there was a mentor or there was a writer who was influential in your life getting to this point.
Honestly, I was a huge, a voracious reader. I've been reading mysteries specifically since grade 3. I started with the Trixie Belden series and then moved on to Nancy Drew and Agatha Christie. And really, those were my mentors. I think I've read, I know I've read thousands of books, and many of them have been mysteries. And that has just planted in my mind, how to write. A lot of the process was intuitive, and I think it is just thanks to the great writing that's out there, and so many great writers still, bringing wonderful books into the world today.
That's great. So if our viewers want to find out more about you and your book, do you have a website that we could direct them to?
I do. My website is ChristinaRomrell.com, and I do have a page that is dedicated to the books, as well as a blog and, of course, a contact page and a page where you can see what I'm going to be doing.
Christina, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us to talk about your book.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
It was our pleasure. That was Christina Romrell, author of A Christmas Candy Killing, and she joined us from her home just south of Lethbridge. For all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Michael Clausen. Thanks for watching.